So I want to kind of talk about the engine and my impressions so far. A lot of you guys have been asking, hey, what do you think about the Yamaha? I want to talk about the engine a little bit. You guys have been asking about the engine. What I think about it, what's my impression, how do I like the Yamaha? I've been giving a lot of thought to that question because I want to make sure that when I put out a recommendation or an opinion on something, I'm giving you guys my full experience with it, and whether or not, now you guys are probably asking whether or not I recommend it. But now it's all dialed in. I've got that coolant system is really the big thing on it. The tuning of the engine was the simplest thing in the world. I literally just plugged in the harness and Brian Diggis did everything else. I'm really, really happy that I went with the BD turnkey setup because it's so dialed in. I mean, you can monitor everything. This display is amazing. I can really feel good about what's going on with the engine at all times because I can see what's going on. Turn the autopilot off. So, there was some hurdles to get it all dialed in. That's to be expected with any new engine installation in an airframe, especially without a whole lot of knowledge to draw on. The guys that have done it in other airframes and the group on the Yamaha Aircraft Conversions Facebook group have been just awesome. And there's just so much information there, it's really awesome. So if you guys are thinking about this engine, first thing you should do is go to that Facebook page, join the group, and read as much as you can about what people are doing with this engine. You also saw, if you've been watching my videos, that initially I was a little disappointed with the cruise performance. And I have to say that I kind of am still, you know, but that wasn't the purpose of the plane. I wasn't really looking for a great cross-country plane. I would have built something differently. So, although I want it to be an amazing short field, land short, take off really short plane, I also kind of greedy about it, also wanted it to cruise really fast. And you're not going to get all those things. If I wanted to set this up for more of a cross-country plane, which I might play around with some configurations just to have it, it's like if I'm going to go on a long trip, I'll put this on or that on. This wing with the Grove gear and a different prop would probably get you a nice 110 or more cruise speed at the 55% cruise power setting. I really think it will. This prop's really not designed to go fast. It almost has negative pitch at the end, so a different prop for cruise would help a lot. That's really the only negative thing I found with the engine so far. The fuel burn is incredible. Right now I'm cruising at under 90 at 4.7 gallons an hour. Again, I'm at 90 because I'm pulled back. I'm at 50% cruise right now because I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere. I'm trying to build some time, kind of see what power settings do on the cruise. If I want to go fast, I can pour the coals to it. I just did a cruise, 65% cruise, running at about 8,800 RPM, and I was seeing about 100. So it's there. It's just, is that extra gallon, it was like 6.6 gallons an hour to get 100 miles per hour. Is that worth the fuel burn? Depends on how you want to run the engine. I really like the way the engine runs between 8 and 8,500 RPM. It's smooth. It doesn't sound like it's working very hard. The temps stay really mellow. Everything's good. So it's kind of where it's going to settle in between 8, probably 8,300, 8,400 is going to be my cruise setting. So other than that initial disappointment about the cruise power of the engine, I'm really happy with it. It's smooth. Now that I have the quiet muffler on it, it's quieter, I think, than a Rotax. I brought the dB meter today, but the battery's dead. I've been using it too much. But it's right around just above 100, about 102. on the dB meter, and that's with the doors open. So I was going to try it with the doors closed to get a different number to share with you guys what the batteries did. So bottom line, would I recommend this engine? Yes. I think it's an awesome option. And I say option because I'm not going to say this is the only way to go on a Kitfox. I don't think that's the case at all. It totally depends on you and your mission. My overall impression is that I'm really happy that I went with the Yamaha. I've flown Rotax, I've flown Lycoming, and I've flown this all in Kitfoxes now. And of all those engines, I haven't flown a 915. But of all those engines, this is my favorite. So yes, I would recommend it.
Just had a visitor from our local field guru mechanic just came by and looked at the plane. He couldn't stop talking about how cool it was. So it always makes you feel good when you have someone who really knows their stuff appreciate what you've done. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate that comment. You guys have been asking about my impressions on this engine and whether or not it's something that I would do again. So let me cover that real quick. I have some clips from the air I might mix in here because I talked about it in the air as well, but the audio wasn't as good. So let me run through the options real quick that you have for a Kitfox that have factory support. You've got all the Rotax, 912 UOS, 912 IS, 914 Turbo, 915 IS. So we'll talk about those. You got Lycoming, Continental, Titan. I believe there's a Viking firewall forward. I don't know if they sold many of them, but they did have a firewall forward at one point. And I believe one of the radials, it's probably the Rotax, has a firewall forward option, I think, because I've seen it on one of their factory ones. Again, I didn't look into the radial. I think a radial is iconic, beautiful, cool sounding, and awesome engine. I think it would make a really cool, unique Kitfox. The guys that have done them, they're beautiful. Performance-wise, for the weight and horsepower, wasn't what I was looking for, but I totally respect the radials on a Kitfox. I think they're super cool. So let's run through those versus the Yamaha. First off, the Aero, the other option that they don't have a firewall forward, I don't think, is Aeromomentum. So Aeromomentum and Viking are both kind of in the same price range of what you would spend on a Yamaha. I don't have any experience with them, but looking at the numbers, the weight is higher for the power. So kind of advantage Yamaha if you're going to go with that same budget range. The Aeromomentum, I believe, the basic one is like 90 horse, and they have like 130 horsepower version that's pretty heavy. The Vikings, I can't keep up on all the different models that they keep putting out. I know that there was a firewall forward, but again, I think it was for 100 to 110 horse engine, and you're going to be a little bit heavier. Other than that, you know, I respect the option of doing something that's not a Rotax and that has similar performance to it for about half the cost. So something to look at if you're looking at those kinds of engines. Let's jump into the Rotax real quick. The 912, all its forms, and the 914, to me, are not a consideration compared to the Yamaha because they're all the same weight as this and have 60 horsepower less on the 912s and, you know, like 45 less on the 914. Edge Performance does hop those engines up. You can get 155 horsepower one from them, and that was actually a consideration for me. Their 155 horsepower engine along with the Rotax 915 kind of have a similar performance. The 915 is going to be heavier. Their 914 from Edge Performance supposedly is 155 horse. My concern there, and I think it's a valid concern, is you're taking an engine that's designed for 100 horse and you're pushing 155 out of it. Where with this engine, it's designed really out of the motorcycle that this design came off of is the Yamaha R1. This engine was then redesigned to go in the sled, but the Yamaha R1 was designed for 200 horsepower, and we're running this at 160. So you're basically derating the engineering versus pushing the engineering. So for me, that's advantage Yamaha again, but that 155 horsepower Edge Performance Rotax is going to be the closest in performance to this. The 915, I think, is a great option for this airframe. I think it pairs up great. I think it's got perfect power. The turbo for altitude performance, especially if you're someone who starts above sea level. Actually, I really like pretty much everything about the 915 IS except for it's a little bit heavier than this application. And the big, huge negative of the 915 is the cost. It's totally ridiculous. I don't know what they think, you know, they're making their engines out of gold or something. Firewall forward for a Kitfox is over $60,000 for a Rotax 915. $60,000. Guys, I have slightly more than that in this entire project. So to spend $60,000 from the firewall forward, it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. On really any airplane, you can do, you know, you can build a carbon cub and have less money firewall forward than that using a Titan 340. So I don't get it. If they want to be competitive, if they brought that firewall forward price down under $40,000, I think it would be something a lot more people would be interested in doing. It's disappointing because it is such a cool setup, but it is still a Rotax, which, you know, it has its common Rotax problems. The things they got rid of with that one is they went fuel injected. So the 915 and the 912 ISs both got rid of the carburetor problems that you're going to be chasing always with the Rotax carbureted versions. So I like that. Haven't heard much about the exhaust cracking on a 915. That seems to be a super common problem with all the other Rotaxes. So time will tell on that. And the coolest thing about the 915 is you don't have to big bore it or tear into the engine and try to change stuff to get horsepower out of it. It already has the horsepower. So stock, I think it's just a good setup. The other ones are Continental, excuse me, Continental 0200 and Lycomings. You can go the 0235, the 0290, the 320, and then a Titan 340. We'll throw that in there because it's basically a Lycoming clone. I think the Continental 0200 is probably the smartest direct drive choice for a Kitfox. Your power to weight ratio is pretty similar to a basic 912 ULS, a little bit heavier, and you can hop those up safely to like 110, 115 horsepower. I think that's a real decent engine choice for the Kitfox. They're super simple. They go forever on TBO. They have decent fuel burn and they don't weigh a lot. I think of the direct drive choices, if you're not looking for high horsepower, the Continental 0200 is a bulletproof engine, been around for ages. I like that setup. The guys that have those like that setup. Jumping into the Lycoming, you got the 0233 and the 0235. 233 is a lightened version of the 235. Again, you're running about 110 horsepower, but a huge weight penalty. You're getting up in the 230 to 240 pound dry weight on those engines. And as you hop up from those to a 290, 320, and 340, the 320 and 340, actually the 320 stock 320 Lycoming is going to be heavier than 340 because 340 has been lightened. But you're getting up in the 260 to you know, I don't know, that's just the dry weight of the engine. So you got your firewall forward, you know, you're getting up there in weight. In comparison, a Rotax comes in, I think, at 178 firewall forward. I'm at 182 firewall forward. But that doesn't include the cowling on either of those weights. And because I took so much weight out of my cowling, I'm actually lighter than a Rotax by 2 pounds. That's based on math. I didn't actually physically weigh it versus a Rotax, but the weight of the factory cowling versus the weight of my carbon fiber cowling got me down so that this setup is lighter than a 912 ULS, definitely lighter than a 914, and way lighter than a 915. So in comparison, those bigger Lycoming engines, you're giving up anywhere from 100 to 150 pounds of useful load, all on the nose. So you have to compensate for that usually by repositioning some of your avionics or your battery or something towards the tail of the aircraft to get the balance right. It is manageable. It's something you can do. You can add ballast, but then you're adding more weight. So coming from a Kitfox 5 with a Lycoming in it, I can tell you the frustrations with a Lycoming is it's heavy and it burns a ton of fuel. And that was just with a 290. So as you go bigger on those, that penalty is larger, more weight, more fuel. You know, burning somewhere between 7 to 8 gallons an hour with that size engine, with a 27-gallon fuel tank, you just don't have the range that you'd want. I'm averaging about 5 gallons an hour running this thing. So, you know, it gives me over 5 hours. So with a little bit reserve, where with, you know, you're running 8 gallons an hour, it gives you basically 3. So it's a huge difference in just by changing your fuel burn by a couple gallons an hour, it makes a huge difference. So the frustrations I always had with the Lycoming was it was heavy. If I wanted to go camping, I always had to carry an extra fuel bag, my camping gear and myself, and I could never take anybody else. Couldn't do it, especially as I went up in altitude, didn't have the performance for it. So it was a one-man airplane when it went to go do adventures. I could fly locally, download the fuel a little bit, I could take passengers, and you know, it's fine. You can do that, it's just gonna be shorter flights. With this one, I can go full fuel, load the baggage up to the CG limit, still have some leftover useful load with two 200-pound guys in it. So that's why I want to build a cargo pod to help move the CG forward on my baggage so that I can actually get to gross weight. So yes, a Lycoming, Continental, Rotax, Aeromomentum, Viking, Rotax, they're all great choices for Kitfox. They're all gonna fly, they're all gonna be unique in their own way, and everyone who makes that choice probably has weighed all the options and they chose that for a particular reason for their mission. And I don't care what engine you put on a Kitfox, you're gonna love flying a Kitfox. That's what it boils down to. We have all these debates and back and forth on the Facebook pages or even in person. We're talking about what the best engine choice is. The best engine choice is the one you choose. If you feel that a budget-friendly, overhauled, or slightly used Lycoming is going to get you in the air and having fun, that is your best choice. That's a choice you make. You're going to be happy with it. As long as you're happy with what you choose, that's all that really matters. What I'm trying to do is to show you guys how this compares to all those different choices. As far as the Rotax go, or the Rotax goes, the only one I would have considered over this is the 915 IS, and I didn't do that because it was too expensive. The Viking, the Aeromomentum, didn't have the horsepower for the weight that I wanted, and the Titan was the other one I looked at. And the Titan with the STI wing, I think is a fairly decent choice, especially for my mission because I'm down at sea level. The performance of a Titan is better than a Rotax 915 until you hit 5,000 feet, and then they swap because the turbo and the drop off in horsepower you'll get on the Titan as you increase altitude. Either way, the Titan's going to burn more fuel. So you're back to being heavy and not having enough fuel. And I've already done that, so I didn't want to do it again. So all those things led me to what I found to be the best power to weight ratio available, and that's the Yamaha.
Really, if I was gonna clean slate design a build for a Kitfox 7, I would go STI and I would go Yamaha APEX, normally aspirated, or I would go Rotax 915 IS. So that was my short explanation of how I like the engine at 10 minutes long.
All right, guys, so just finished editing up a episode on sharing my opinions on this engine. Just about ready to upload it. I went for a flight the other morning right after finishing the edit to try out some new tires and wheels from Behringer and Desser, and ran into an issue with the engine. Like I said from the get-go, I'm going to share my experience with you. But on this one, guys, I don't want this to come across as a real negative towards this installation. I think this is something that was not apparent, but present from the get-go. If you guys go back to this first episode and the second episode of flight testing, where I was trying to diagnose if potentially I had a head gasket leak. It was the best explanation for a lot of the issues I was seeing with the aeration of the coolant, the problems with the circulation of the coolant over the heat exchanger, causing some of my heating issues. And it actually showed up on a flight I did the other day. I got back and there was coolant coming out from underneath the cowling. So not a lot, but enough to be concerned with. So I pulled the cowlings, and I don't know if you guys can see, but there's kind of some white residue on the side of the case here, and up, it's coming right from the two halves where the head and the case meet up, right at the head gasket. Right between the number 2 and the number 3 cylinder, it is leaking coolant. So there is a bad head gasket on this engine. Now this is one of the negatives of this engine choice, because you take it out of a sled and you put it in the airplane and you don't know the condition of the engine. So how am I going to deal with this? Well, I've got another engine in my truck. I'm going to put it on, and it's a very low time, very good condition engine externally. Again, I don't know what the internals look like, and that's the problem. That's what where I'm having an issue with choosing this engine. So because that is an issue, we've kind of gone down a road of trying to find a way to ensure that the engine is top notch before it goes on the airplane. Now I am going to swap this other one on here, but I'm going to take this one and I'm going to send it to a guy, and I'll share his contact information after I've worked with him to make sure that it all goes well. But basically what he's going to do is he's going to tear the engine down, do all new gaskets, rings, water pump parts, rod, bolts, and nuts. He's going to true out that head because it's probably warped. That's probably why the head gasket's leaking. New valve seals, and then the labor. And then the shipping, the freight there and back. All that's going to run about $2,000. So if you figure an overhaul of this engine is $2,000, what I was talking about earlier is for $2,500 you could just pop a new engine in there. You can, but you don't know the condition of that engine, and you could run into something like this 25 hours down the road. So really what I'd like to put out there is that you should consider the cost of this engine more in the $4,500 to $5,000 range, or $6,000 range. By the time you buy the engine, send it to someone to do a full inspection of it, go through it, replace any parts that need to be replaced, and check it all out. Now, there is the risk that if you take a Yamaha built, factory built engine that's all built to their specs, tolerance and torques and everything, and then you send it to somebody and they tear it down and put it back together, there's a potential there to have it not go back together as well as it did from the factory. That is the case with any engine, any overhaul shop that you're using that's not the factory. In this case, I wish I had done that at this point. I could send this other engine to him first, but that would mean I'd be down for months. I'm going to go ahead and put this engine in. I'm going to send this one out to have rebuilt, and I'll have these two engines, and I'll always have two engines. There'll always be a good engine ready to go in if need be. But really the point is, I don't want this to be a deterrent for you guys as far as what your opinion is of the Yamaha. I don't think it had anything to do with how we're running it, how the installation's done. I think this honestly was just really bad luck on the fact that it had a bad head gasket, and I think it had it from day one because we suspected that from day one. It had symptoms of it from day one. We tried to eliminate it the best we could and worked around with these coolant situations and improvements, which I think are going to be good all around anyways. But it'll be interesting to see when I put this other engine in if I have any temp issues, or if it's going to run way cooler than this one was. And who knows, there could be a bearing issue in there. There could be something that caused heat to cause the warping of the head to cause the leaky gasket. So something's going on with this engine. It's going to come off and go get inspected basically. So what I need to do here is go ahead and take the exhaust off, undo all the electrical and fuel. I also have to undo the oil system. Prop needs to come off. Airbox and throttle bodies are coming off. I'm just going to use this throttle body and put it back on the other engine. Once that's all disconnected, then I can loosen the engine mounts, lift the engine out, and put the other one on. Now, a couple things I have to wait for is the parts internally for the gearbox. There's a seal in here and a gasket that I'll need for the new engine. So those are on order from Teal Jenkins. The new engine I've got in here still has the clutch on it. Now, I tried a couple different methods to get the clutch off without the actual puller, and I couldn't do it. So I went ahead and bought the puller, and it is on its way. Oh, doesn't that make you sad? Okay, so engine's out, sitting over there. New engine's right here. Still a lot of work to go. I'm gonna pull the radiator so I can flush it and pressurize it, make sure I don't have a leak in the radiator, because there's fluid everywhere. That was originally what I thought was going on, was a radiator leak, but it's coming from the engine, I hope. Then I don't have two problems. So we'll get that cleaned up. I gotta pull the exhaust off, get it all cleaned up because it's got all the coolant on there. And then pull all the stuff off of that engine. Goes on that engine. All right, guys, so got the new engine in. I just got the parts from Teal Jenkins at Skytrax. Sent me a seal for the new engine, a new O-ring, and a new gasket to go on this new engine. So I'm gonna get the gearbox moved over. Then it's a matter of putting the air box back on and putting the fluids in it. I am gonna take some distilled water and run it through the system and flush it out. And let me tell you why. So the whole story behind what happened here was when I come to a stop after flying, I was getting a little drip of coolant out from underneath the cowling. Or not even the cowling, it was coming right from the radiator, right from the corner of the radiator, a little drip. So I was pretty sure I had like a little pinhole leak somewhere in the radiator. And after 25 hours, I was pretty disappointed that that was happening. I looked over everything on the engine trying to find where this leak could come from, but it was only showing up in the radiator. So because of how hard it was to get all the air out of the system initially, I didn't want to drain it, pull the radiator off, and pressure test it. In hindsight, I should have done that. I was going to order a new radiator and just put a new one on, but they're expensive. I didn't know if this one could be repaired. I wasn't sure what was going on there. A couple people recommended using some coolant leak stop in the system. I said, well, if it doesn't work, you're going to have to replace the radiator anyways. Why not try it? And I'm always really skeptical of some additive fixing an engine problem. Usually an engine problem is there's a reason, and putting some magic chemical in there is not going to fix it. But I did look it up, and I read through all the different brands. I went with this Blue Devil stuff that had great ratings. Everyone really recommended it. Even the race industry said it's totally harmless, can't do any damage. And it was all very recommended. It says right on it, it's safe for any engine, any kind of water pump. It's totally a safe product. So that's what I did. I put some of this leak stop in there, hoping I could plug up this little pinhole leak that was in my radiator. Well, I didn't get 15 minutes into that flight when I started seeing coolant everywhere on my gear legs. So I knew something was up. So when I landed, not only did I have the leak from the head gasket area, but the water pump was leaking fairly badly. Matter of fact, I'll show a video here of after I took the cowling off and ran it, you could see the water pump leaking. This all happened right after I putting in this additive. And so, you know, whether or not it caused the head gasket to leak or it just showed that the head gasket had a leak and that stuff came out from there, I kind of lean towards the latter, where it just showed me that it did have a problem. And so really that's a good thing, because I'd rather know that it has a bad head gasket by having some coolant leak out than the engine failing. But I just want to let you guys know the full story so you don't just think that the head gaskets blow out on these engines. Not sure what the cause of it was. I can tell you that putting that leak stop stuff in there, I wouldn't recommend doing that at all. That turned out really poorly, especially with the water pump. So I'm going to flush this out real good with this distilled water, run it a little bit with the distilled water, drain it, and then I'll put the coolant in. But right now I'm going to go ahead and get the gearbox installed and get this thing ready to run again. So it took about 3 hours to take the engine out, 4 hours to put this engine back in, and then however long it takes to do this gearbox, you know, minus the time I'm taking to film it. Should be, you know, really could be done in a day if you had all your parts. You could pull an engine, swap it, and put another one back in. So I was just cleaning out the coolant, and this is what the coolant turned into when I added that stuff. It's almost like a jello. See this paste down here? You can't imagine your coolant flowing very well if it turns into that. So moral of the story is don't put that additive crap in your engine, or you'll be sorry like I am.
Keep it close in here. See how smoky it is. Kind of forcing a flight here. It is 6 miles viz, but I'm going to stay right in pattern. Alright, so my numbers on this engine. After about 5 minutes, 178 on the coolant, 196 on the oil. Just perfect. Pressure's at 55 instead of 50. Gained 5 psi on this engine over the other one. Well, temps climbed to 205, also still super good. Actually, want it closer to 210. That's where we'd like it to sit. Numbers are still looking real consistent. 183 on the coolant temp, 207 on the oil temp. At about 99 miles an hour right now. 100. Still 86 degrees. Cut traffic, Kitfox on the upwind, 1.5, rate pattern. Go around one more time. I don't want to stay up too long in case I am leaking anything. Gear legs are dry. That's how I noticed last time is the gear legs had coolant on them. It looks like the engine's stabilized now at 181 coolant, 208 on the oil. Haven't seen it change much. I did let it creep up a little bit in RPM.
All right, back in the air. So guys, I'm gonna wrap this one up here. This video covered the my opinion of this engine, and then the event that happened with the engine that was originally put in this, swapping out to the new engine. Even after all that, I still recommend the Yamaha. I'm very happy with its performance. I think overall I got a little unlucky with that first engine, and I think it did have a head gasket leak right from the get-go, and here's why. After running this new engine for about an hour, came back, pulled the cowlings, and I had 0 coolant in the overflow reservoir. After every flight of the original engine, I would have some coolant in that overflow reservoir. And I've been scratching my head about that the whole time, because the radiator cap on the expansion tank is like a 14 to 16 psi, somewhere in there. And in order to get that kind of pressure in a coolant system, you'd have to get the temp really high, higher than I'm seeing on the indicated coolant temperatures, way higher. And it's not enough heat to open that radiator cap, allowing that coolant to vent. So something else was being introduced into the coolant system. We saw the problem with the aeration. I don't think it was necessarily how the coolant system was set up. I think it was exhaust being leaked into the coolant system through the head gasket leak. So that was causing extra pressure in the system and then allowing that radiator cap to open and the coolant to overflow. Sometimes just a little bit. I played around with the level and got it to where it wasn't much of a problem, but I did see coolant after every flight. And so this new engine, first flight, flew it for an hour, not a drop. So it just leads me, all clues leading back to that head gasket on the original engine having a small leak at some point. Putting that additive in there definitely didn't help things. It immediately blew the seal on the water pump. So that is what ended up letting me know I had a problem. 18 minutes into the flight was coolant was coming out of the water pump. And then once looking over the engine, seeing that residual coolant stain at the head gasket, it just kind of all started to add up at that point. That additive was definitely a bad idea though. I'm going to be contacting the manufacturer and talking to them, at least letting them know the issues I had. It turned the coolant to jelly. I showed that picture of that just green goo that came out of the coolant system. Everything's been flushed. The new engine never had any of that in it. So I think I'm good to go. I'm gonna go fly it and get some time on this. I got to crunch out, get done with phase 1. Reno's coming up pretty quick. Today's August 10th or August 9th. We are just over a month out from Reno. So I've got a lot of work to do still. I got a couple things I want to play around with before then, and I'm not here very much between now and then. So this week I have to at least get my 40 hours flown off. So if I had to take it as it sits to Reno and run it, I'll be able to do that. Then any modifications I want to do from there, I can do if I have the time. I'm not going to get time to put the other wing on. That's going to be a winter project, I think. I may swap the landing gear just to try out the new landing gear. I know you guys, a bunch of you are waiting to see how that goes. We'll see. So I got some stuff going on there still, so stay tuned for some more videos coming out, and then definitely follow along for the Reno stole drags. 2 weeks later, we've got the Snake River stole drags up in Ontario, Oregon, and then 2 weeks later, we got the High Sierra World Championship stole drags. So I'll be bringing the cameras along for all that and see how the plane's going to kind of match up with my old plane. There's going to be much more tough competition there at all those events this year because the sport's growing. There's a lot more contenders, and some of the older contenders that were there from the beginning with me, they are also bringing new airplanes. So it's going to be interesting. I don't expect any sort of championship, especially since the guys that are really devoting a lot of time, money, and effort to it are running, just twice the horsepower. So they are going to put it in different categories now. So we're going to have a gold class, silver class, and bronze class. And those will be based off of times. And they're kind of projecting who's going to be in which category. But I'll probably be right there in the silver class. And so I may be competitive there. We'll see. I mean, there's some tough competition, but the horsepower between the people in the top of that class matches up with this one. So then it comes down a lot to pilot skill, and I am very rusty, guys, so I'm going to get to it. I'm going to go out and do some flying, get some practice in, and really start to try to get comfortable with this plane. And thanks for watching. Check out the Facebook page for the Yamaha aircraft conversions if you guys are looking at this engine. Great place to start your research and get in and find all the different information that has led me to where I am as far as the development, and we're also sharing anything that we come up on and discover ourselves on that Facebook page. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like the channel. Leave me a comment. Let me know what your experience is with that coolant additive. Let me know what you guys think about the head gasket theory, and just any comments you have about my comparison between the Yamaha and the other engines available. Like I said, the best engine is the one that you choose, and so I'm not trying to push the Yamaha on you guys at all. There's no benefit for me, really. I just want to say that I'm happy with the decision I've made, even though I had to swap an engine, because of the performance is there. So again, thanks for watching. You guys stay tuned for future videos.